go into a great album.
The idea that you can listen to the whole thing, obviously, from top to bottom.
Good lyrical content.
Variety.
The musicality.
Records that are timeless.
Albums where the songs hang together very nicely, but they're all quite different.
Fear and pain.
Not, like, contrived.
Not trying to make hit singles out of each song.
The vocal, the way it lays in the track.
A certain kind of concentrated focus.
Sound, mixing.
Things that maybe you want to pick up an instrument.
They're albums that still sound very fresh today.
Something that I can put on and listen to the whole way through, and at the end of it feel that I've just, you know, I've been given something special.
Welcome back to VH1's 100 Greatest Albums of Rock and Roll. I'm Jeff Bridges. There are 40 albums left to count down. As you'll see, a great album isn't limited to any one traditional genre. Our list includes jazz, hip-hop, and punk recordings, as well as numerous classic rock staples. Narrowing down the list of great albums to only 100 was a big job, so VH1 got help. Here's how the list was determined.
VH1 polled over 500 musicians and rock journalists, asking them to select the greatest albums of the last 50 years. Elvis Costello, Carole King, Britney Spears, Sly Stone, and many others cast their vote, but the results have been kept confidential until now.
Now, before we get back to the countdown, take a look at the 60 albums you might have missed. After years of singing with a gritty R&B group, this next artist went solo and started down a more mystical path. This, his second solo album, didn't make a dent in the charts, but its admirers place it in a class by itself.
I mean, that's just one of the greatest albums of all time. It's a beautifully plotted album, sequence-wise, but musically such a delicate album. You can listen to it 1,000 times and hear something new every time you listen to it.
Well, I'm caught one more time. Way up on Cypress Avenue.
After Weeks might be the best record that, you know, of original thought that anybody's ever made.
6 white horses in a carriage. Just returning from the fair. Here I am right now, and I'm caught one more time.
It's so completely unlike anything that went before it. You can sort of hear the influence of certain kinds of music upon it, and the vocal performances are the freest that I think Van ever recorded.
Hello, your revelation, baby. Hello, your. Hello, your.
Throughout the 60s, Carole King wrote hit songs for artists such as the Shirelles and Aretha Franklin. But with 1971's Tapestry, it was her moment to shine as a performer.
So far away, doesn't anybody stay in one place anymore?
First and foremost, I'm a songwriter. I will always be a songwriter first. And one way to present them is for me to sing them.
Doesn't help to know you're just time away.
The album provided a template for 70s singer-songwriters with its soft, contemplative melodies and painful yet redemptive lyrics.
I feel the earth move under my feet. I feel the sky tumbling down.
Tapestry is a great album. Those are songs that people can cover and they still sound great. And she, to a certain extent, she's one of the people who invented rock and roll.
Tonight you're mine completely. You give your love so sweetly.
When I was recording Tapestry, I was just making a record of songs that I was writing at that particular time. And the fact that the combination of songs happened to resonate with so many people was something I never could have predicted.
But will you love me tomorrow?
In 1976, the Eagles released their epic commentary on the dangers of West Coast living, Hotel California. With country-style vocals and rock-bass guitar, songwriters Don Henley and Glenn Frey offered a song cycle of Hotel California became the Eagles' third consecutive #1 album and helped the band break country rock to a mainstream pop audience.
We had no idea that the album would affect that many people worldwide. There was a lot of chemistry that was being defined at the time, and that comes out in the magic of the music.
Before Hotel California's release, the Eagles were working as a backup band for another country rock sensation, Linda Ronstadt. Coming up after the break, Lauryn Hill takes us back to school. And super heavy funk from the hardest working men in show business. VH1's 100 Greatest Albums of Rock and Roll continue. The albums on the list were released before her birth. But her solo debut displayed the maturity of someone who had fully absorbed the last 40 years of pop music.
We about to set this one right.
After 2 albums with the Fugees, Lauryn Hill stepped out on her own and recorded one of the most ambitious records of the 90s.
You might win some, but you just lost one. You might win some, but you just lost one.
The Lauryn Hill album, I think, it's a favourite of all of ours. It's the best new female vocal album to come out for many years.
It could all be so simple.
Great lyrics, great grooves, modern, what a voice. What else can you say about it?
Released in 1998, the Miseducation of Lauryn Hill was hailed as a breath of fresh air in hip-hop. The 23-year-old wrote about everything from her childhood to the birth of her son.
She's been listening to what she wanted to put out in the world, and she created an atmosphere for her album. Without an atmosphere, without any feelings or emotions in the music, who cares?
With cameos by Mary J. Blige, D'Angelo, and Santana, Hill's album was a seamless blend of retro funk, soul, and reggae that earned her 5 Grammys, including Best New Artist and Album of the Year.
Lauryn Hill's album was like a glimpse into her life. It was fresh and it was really well drawn out, so you really kind of felt like you got to travel in her shoes.
She raps, she sings, she produces, and I love her message. It's a wonderful album and deserved everything, all the accolades, all the Grammys. It was terrific.
You know, I was wondering, yours, it's got a lot of power in it.
1979's Off the Wall signaled Michael Jackson's coming of age. After walking away from the Jackson 5, the 21-year-old broke through with 4 top 10 hits, including the #1 singles Don't Stop Till You Get Enough and Rock With You.
The Wall was a classic album. It changed things that came up in the 80s, but Michael Jackson put it down in the 70s. To me, the epitome of an artist.
Produced by Quincy Jones, Off the Wall was a mix of disco, funk, and catchy ballads, proving Michael Jackson as a performer and artist far beyond his boyhood Motown beginnings.
You're talking about somebody that's been on the other side of a screaming fan since he was 5 years old. They were crazy after Off the Wall.
Michael Jackson sings terrific. He is a first-rate artist.
She's out of my life.
I'm one of the people that love She's Out of My Life, that ballad with that lovely lyric that makes him choke up at the end. That whole song knocked me out.
She's out of my life.
And that was his way of delivering it.
In creating the double album, Prince fused electro, funk, gospel, and soul with dark imagery inspired by the social issues of the 80s.
He has a line in Signs of the Times where, you know, he talks about which is, like, to me, very significant, and sometimes you could say something that's a volume of words without saying any words at all.
Originally intended as an album by Prince's alter ego, Camille, Sign paired psychosexual love songs with religious salvation.
There's a lot more sensuality in what Prince is doing than most artists.
We don't have to make children to make love.
Maybe he doesn't know right now how innovative he's being. Maybe in 10, 15 years with that hindsight, he's going to say, oh, yeah, I did some pretty interesting things.
I'll do it so good, I swear I'll drink every ounce. Then I'd hold you tight and hold you long, and together we'll stand in silence.
Prince says that the first record he ever bought was by our next artist. He's a performer whose influence on Prince and just about everyone else in soul music cannot be overestimated.
I want to get up and do my thing. Yeah. Can I get into it? Yeah. Like a sex machine.
In 1970, James Brown released Sex Machine, the double album that captured the godfather of soul in his element, live and on stage.
James Brown's Sex Machine brought that fever pitch up. Give It Up, Turn It Loose, live, was a significant record in the beginnings of rap music and hip hop.
Recorded during a concert in Augusta, Georgia, Sex Machine documents James Brown's evolution, from the godfather of 60s soul to the king of 70s super heavy funk.
Oh, baby! Get up, get on up, get up, get on up, stay on the scene, get on up like a sex machine, get on up.
Just about everything that the Godfather did has been great because he's influenced rock, R&B in so many different ways.
Sing your money, make money. Sing your money, make money. Can I hit it quick? Hit it quick! Hit it quick! Hit it quick!
In 1970, Simon and Garfunkel, the most successful folk rock duo of the 60s, recorded their final studio album, Bridge Over Troubled Water.
Bridge Over Troubled Water is an album that has different colors, and it's always going in a different place. If it was a boxer getting the audience, it would be a left, right, and then an uppercut. When we sequenced it, we had that kind of thing in mind.
In the clearing stands a boxer and a fighter by his...
Bridge Over Troubled Water was Simon and Garfunkel's greatest commercial success, topping the charts for 10 weeks and earning 6 Grammys. But it couldn't save the duo's crumbling relationship.
We were really in a different place musically by then anyway. Even on Bridge Over Troubled Water, we're only singing on about 3 or 4 tracks together. We had run out of patience with each other.
The album's title track stood out as their masterpiece and has gone on to be recorded by over 200 artists.
Bridge Over Troubled Water will be around forever and ever and ever and ever.
It's a heroic, big tune, you know, and it helps a lot of people. It does a lot for you when you hear it.
In 1970, Van Morrison truly embraced his R&B influences.
In his interpretations.
You light yourself one more Moondance with you, my love. And the caravan is on its way.
Morrison broke from his jazzy free-form recording style to incorporate a horn section and much tighter, more melodic compositions.
The Moondance songs, the influence of R&B is very, very strong, and the songs are heavily structured.
Turn it up. That's enough. So you know.
You can recognize it as a band that could be playing in a bar. They're just playing these really great songs.
Jenna, one more time. Jenna, one.
With Moondance, Van Morrison forged a new musical path for himself and achieved the greatest commercial success of his career.
I guess I like artists who mix spirituality and sexuality. You know, he's a spiritual teacher.
Coming up, Aretha's breakthrough.
What you want?
And the album that made Mr. Springsteen a star, when the 100 greatest albums of rock and roll continues. We're back with VH1's salute to rock's greatest albums. While the next album was climbing the charts, this artist was nearly killed in a car accident that left him in a coma for 4 days. Thankfully, he recovered, and 8 months later, he attended the Grammys, where this album was honored as the year's best.
In 1973, 23-year-old singer and composer Stevie Wonder embarked on his most political effort to date, Innervisions.
Innervisions definitely meant a lot to me. It was just something peaceful for the mind, just something to listen to.
Inspired by Motown label mate Marvin Gaye, Wonder took creative control of his career and began experimenting with jazz and funk, weightier lyrical themes, and his own versatile voice.
His sister's black, but she is short and pretty. Skirt is short, a lot of legs that stick down. Off to school, she's got to get up early. Her clothes are old, but never they dirty. Maybe just enough for the city.
With Innervisions, Wonder came to represent the new face of Motown, one of higher thought, social consciousness, and innovative sound.
I believe that people were able to feel the energies of those different things that happened around that time in my life.
The singer had recently signed with Atlantic Records, who paired her with Muscle Shoals session players to record the breakthrough album, I Never Loved a Man the Way I Love You.
I mean, I Never Loved a Man the Way I Love You. That might be the best single ever made. It has this center to it. It's easily my favorite record by her.
You're no good, heartbreaker. You're a liar and you're a cheat. And I don't know why I let you do these things to me.
She was let loose to be Aretha and become the Queen of Soul.
Finally given the control over song selection and arrangements, Aretha started a string of hits that ensured her place among rhythm and blues royalty.
Now don't you send me no doctor, filling me up with all of those pills. 'Cause I got me a man named Dr. Feelgood, yeah.
I've learned more about being a woman from listening to her than I would have ever learned from any man.
Oh, good God Almighty, that man sure makes me feel real good.
The next artist transformed popular music in the 60s, but by the mid-70s, some thought that his great work was behind him. That was until he staged one of his many comebacks with the album at number 29.
Though instantly hailed as a masterpiece, Blood on the Tracks nearly slipped through Bob Dylan's fingers.
Early one morning, the sun was shining. She was lying in bed, wondering if she changed it all, if her hair was.
On the eve of its debut, Dylan halted the album's release and reworked several of the songs to better reflect his original vision.
Blood on the Tracks is very intense and very intimate.
He was standing on the side of the road, rain falling on his shoes. Heading out for the East Coast, Lord knows he paid some dues. Getting through, tangled up in blue.
The 1975 album, in which Dylan adopts a persona that deals with love lost and love found, churns with emotional pain. It is intensely personal, yet universally poignant.
Blood on the Tracks I liked because it was so intimate, because it was very brave.
They sat together in the park as the evening sky grew dark.
And so, exposing his vulnerable side, Dylan reconnected with his audience on a new, mature level, cementing Blood on the Tracks as one of his most compelling and revealing albums.
Dylan is a great puppeteer who pulls the strings on his own self brilliantly.
And watched out for a simple twist of fate.
Rising up from New York's pre-punk underground, singer, composer, and poet Patti Smith delivered her brand of raw emotion and eloquent lyrics on her 1975 debut album, Horses.
I went to buy Horses 3 weeks before it came out, and every day until the day that it came out. And the day it came out, I sat up all night listening to it.
I love her voice. She's just, it's so true. You know, she's all connected up.
Suddenly, Johnny gets a feeling he's been surrounded by horses, 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 horses.
Horses opened the doors on Smith's career as she tackled taboo subjects such as religion and sexuality, and broke down barriers for women in rock with her uninhibited demeanor and delivery.
When I was getting into punk rock, a friend of mine brought Patti Smith over, and it didn't really sound like punk to me. It sounded like something completely different. This voice, which sounds like a genie locked up inside a bottle, trying to get out.
I remembered hearing Patti Smith for the first time and realizing that here was someone who was mixing poetry with rock and roll, and I thought, that's it.
Patti Smith's biggest hit was co-written by the next artist. With the release of this album, he received unprecedented media attention, but over the years, he lived up to the hype.
New Jersey native Bruce Springsteen went from cult figure to the new voice of America's working class with his third album, 1975's Born to Run.
When I went in to make Born to Run, I guess I was trying to take the images that had meant a lot to me and that I'd grown up with, and I wanted to try and find a way to write about those things that didn't feel anachronistic and somehow brought in the tone of the times.
Springsteen's first time in a major recording studio paid off. With new musicians and a fully produced sound, the album featured thunderous music matched by Springsteen's bittersweet, rebellious lyrics.
I was a really big fan of Springsteen's first two albums, and then suddenly there was this band sound on Born to Run and this big production number at the beginning of it, the title song.
It changed the way I felt about music. It changed the way music spoke to me. He just spoke to that aching emptiness inside of me.
Bob Marley Exodus, great reggae record. A lot of songs about life all around
Great music. Great music.
After
a 1976 assassination attempt, Bob Marley left Jamaica for London and recorded the album he'd already named, Exodus.
We're jamming, and we're jamming in the name of the Lord.
There are billions of other reggae artists, but none of them have ever necessarily had just that thing that Bob had in his voice that would make anyone from any culture prick up their ears and listen to him.
With songs of love and struggle, Exodus became one of the first reggae albums to reach the U.S. pop charts, strengthening Marley's reputation as Jamaica's most visionary artist.
Another case of someone who found his way out of and solved some desperate situation, not only of his own, but of his people's, with his music. It's heroic. It's heroic.
Tragically, Marley died of a brain tumor 4 years after the release of Exodus. To honor him, his birthday was declared a national holiday in Jamaica. Coming up, rock's last angry band.
Looking back at the Clash in the year 2000, you forget the unbelievable genius of that band.
The album that financed Michael Jackson's backyard amusement park, and the results of our viewers' poll for the greatest albums of the 90s. Stay tuned.
Here's a look at the results of VH1.com's poll for the greatest albums of the 90s.
At the dawn of the 80s, an oil crisis contributed to a sharp increase in record prices. But the next group lived up to their populist image by insisting that this double album sell at a discount rate.
"1979's London Calling featured musically diverse, politically charged songs, delivered by the group hailed as the only band that matters.
London calling to the faraway towns. Now war is declared and battle come down.
Looking back at the Clash in the year 2000, you forget the unbelievable genius of that band. I mean, wow.
London Calling pushed the Clash beyond their punk rock contemporaries by adding R&B, reggae, and rockabilly to their ferocious signature sound.
They were about my favorite group. I used to play London Calling all the time. They had great songs on it, and they had songs that you wouldn't expect them to write.
At the time of London Calling, punk music was like painting itself into a corner. In a way, we wanted to like burst it all out and say we could do any type of music.
London Calling was our statement of what we were going to do with the music. There was no intellectualizing it, which is maybe why it turns out great.
Released 5 months after the death of co-founder Brian Jones, the Rolling Stones' Let It Bleed reflected the turmoil of the late 60s.
Let It Bleed, it's a great favourite of mine. It's got an incredible opening, you know, it just kind of, there's a guitar that just kind of very quietly sort of slides in and it gets louder and louder, and it kind of gets closer and closer.
Give Me Shelter. That's the greatest Rolling Stones song. There's just something about it. They caught something on tape that was real special.
With new guitarist Mick Taylor, Let It Bleed featured some of the Stones' most ambitious music, including their 7.5-minute epic, You Can't Always Get What You Want.
I saw
Let It Bleed was influential to me because I just made it a point to learn every song on the record.
Though Michael Jackson grew up in the limelight with the Jackson 5, it was the 1982 release Thriller that made the 24-year-old the biggest pop star in the world.
One of the greatest albums I record has to be Thriller.
I don't think anybody knew how big he really was until Thriller just became this epic, huge thing.
Songs like Billie Jean and Beat It came to represent the new sound of the 80s, while Jackson's Moonwalk and Gloved Hand spawned new fashion and dance trends.
Beat It was a great song by Michael. In fact, Michael is one of my favorite singers. He's one of the few rock and roll singers that can really sing.
When Thriller came out, he created such a persona, and he brought choreography to its knees all around him.
As the first major album of the MTV generation, Thriller's groundbreaking music videos propelled its sales to over 30 million copies, making it the biggest selling album to date.
She was more like a beauty queen from a movie scene. I said, don't mind, but what do you mean? I am the one who would dance on the floor in the round.
If it wasn't for Michael Jackson, shows like VH1 and
MTV,
and things like that probably wouldn't even exist.
I've always wanted to see an artist like Michael attain that stature, because it's never happened to a black artist before. I'm glad to be alive to see that happen.
When some of Jackson's fellow Jehovah's Witnesses objected to the ghoulish imagery in the Thriller video, Jackson added a disclaimer stressing that the video in no way endorsed belief in the occult. Coming up, rock's great lyricist.
Like Picasso, who constantly changed, Dylan did the same thing. He just sort of exploded the whole equation.
A collection of songs that launched the rock and roll era. And we'll look at the albums topping Wyclef Jean's list when VH1's 100 Greatest Albums of Rock and Roll continues.
Albums on Wyclef Jean's ballot.
R-E-F-U-G-E. Get the CD from Sam Goody. You ain't even close with the rhymes that you wrote. Don't be mad because you broke. Let me clear my throat.
It used to be that a hit song had to be about 3 minutes long, had to follow a traditional structure, and had to feature a singer whose voice was immediately pleasing to the ear. But when this album's first single hit the airwaves, those rules no longer applied.
With 1965's Highway 61 revisited, Bob Dylan dropped the folk from his earlier folk rock experiments and helped reinvent rock and roll.
Once upon a time you dressed so fine, threw the bumps of dime in your prime. Then you...
Like a Rolling Stone was the ultimate rebellious rock song that I can remember.
How does it feel?
Like Picasso, who constantly changed, Dylan did the same thing. He just sort of exploded the whole equation.
Like a Rolling Stone.
From the first electric strings of Like a Rolling Stone to the 11-minute epic Desolation Row, the album proved again and again that the days of the polished 3-minute pop song were over.
Mama's in a factory.
She ain't got no shoes. It's pretty good for a white guy to cop that attitude.
I'm in the kitchen with the Tombstone Blues.
A smashing success, Highway 61 Revisited not only revealed Dylan at the top of his craft, but also captured the creation of a genuinely new sound, whose influence can still be heard today.
I give Dylan the credit as the great phraser in the history of rock and roll. I'm crazy about this album. This album kills me.
Something is happening here and you don't know what it is. Do you, Mr. Jones?
In 1954, a 19-year-old truck driver named Elvis Presley entered Sam Phillips' Son Studios and made a series of recordings that became the foundation of rock and roll.
Train, train, coming round the bend.
Over 20 years later, Elvis's revolutionary early singles were released on one album, The Sun Sessions.
The Sun Sessions, I mean, yeah, it's a must-have. You can't not have that. It was a white guy doing black music, and that's what they called it. And that's why there was so much protest on it.
This was a total revelation to a lot of white America, who all of a sudden woke up and said, hey, this stuff is cool. The parents all got worried, oh, the kids are going to start fooling around with each other. They were right, because we did.
All those early Sun records, you know, Mystery Train and Good Rockin' Tonight and Want to Play House with You and That's All Right Mama. He invented something amazing.
When I was a little kid, we had the Pirates of Penzance, and then suddenly Elvis was there. Oh, young and snotty and pissed off.
I'm leaving town, baby. I'm leaving town for sure. Well, then you won't be bothered with me hanging around your door, but that's all right.
Elvis did it first, did it best. He was the beginning of rock and roll.
That's all right, now, mama, any way you do.
Only 20 albums remain in our climb to #1. In the next hour, we're going to find out which album is the greatest in rock history. I'm Jeff Bridges. So long.